Thanks everyone for being here. Um, we're so excited that you took the time out of your day to learn more about how we can tackle plastic waste together. This webinar will be recorded for folks who are unable to attend live with us, but who have expressed interest in the material. So during today's webinar, leaders from Los Angeles and Berkeley will share information about the plastic reduction programs they've worked to implement in their cities. And while we know there's always more to be done, these programs are more expansive than similar efforts in other cities. And so we'll share some advocacy resources for community members and activists who want to encourage their city to take stronger actions against plastic waste today. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have a few minutes to share some questions, which you can submit via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen under the More circle with 3 dots. Before we dive in, we'll take one moment. I'll just take a moment to introduce myself and also talk a little bit about the issue of plastic waste today before handing the baton over to our speakers. So I'm Fiona Hines. I'm a legislative advocate with CalPIRG, and I work mostly on our campaigns to move beyond waste, especially plastic waste. And for those of you who don't know us already, CalPIRG is a public interest advocacy group. We work to pass policies at the state and local levels that will protect Californians' well-being, especially policies that protect the environment and public health. Most recently, we helped pass the law to finally ban plastic grocery bags in the state. So why are we all here today? Likely it's because we all agree that plastic waste is a big problem. Globally, we're dumping more than 2 garbage trucks worth of plastic into the ocean every minute. And so from production to disposal, we know that plastic waste threatens the environment and our health. And plastics are primarily made from fossil fuels. So to produce them in the first place requires drilling for oil, and the extracting and refining of these fossil fuels releases toxic substances into the air, including carcinogens and known neurotoxins. And when plastic breaks down, it turns into smaller pieces called microplastics, which have now unfortunately been found all over the world and even in our own bodies, potentially exposing us to harmful toxins that can impact our health. So given all these harms, we know we need to dramatically reduce the amount of disposable plastic products that we're producing and handing to consumers each day. That's why we, CalPIRG, along with our coalition partners, helped to pass the true plastic grocery bag ban this year. That was finally signed into law in September, and why we're continuing to push for more ambitious action to reduce plastic waste at every level of government. We know that cities often pioneer these transformative efforts, modeling that change is possible. And before the passage of the first plastic bag ban, more than 100 cities and counties banned plastic bags, ultimately leading to this great statewide action. And that's why we have this webinar here today. By sharing ideas and learnings from efforts to tackle plastic waste both in Los Angeles and Berkeley, we know that we can spread change to even more cities in California. And so with that, I want to introduce today's speakers who will be sharing about the plastic busting actions that they take in their cities. Representing Los Angeles on the call today, we are grateful to have with us Council President Emeritus Paul Krikorian, who helped lead Los Angeles to take on some of the most ambitious plastic policies in the state. Also from Los Angeles, we have Marjorie Fan, who's the environmental supervisor at LA Sanitation and Environment. She supports ordinance implementation, enforcement, and public education. And also from Berkeley today, we have Julia Heath, who is the secretary of the Berkeley Zero Waste Commission. So thank you all for being here today. I'm going to pass the baton off to Council President Emeritus Krikorian.
Well, thank you very much, Fiona. I want to thank you and CalPIRG, first of all, for all the great work that you're doing on this issue, but also for bringing us together so we can have a discussion about the challenges that plastics pollution creates for the world, but also what some of the solutions are that already cities and states across the country are starting to implement. And I think by having discussions like this, we can really kind of sort through what are best practices that work and what are the practices that may sound good in principle but are less effective. And I'm really proud of the role that Los Angeles has taken already, so I appreciate being included in this. And just to underscore, first of all, the urgency of this issue and some of the points that you were describing about the global scale of plastics pollution. The United Nations estimates that by 2050, there will be as much plastic in the ocean as fish. On an average, in an average week, people who use single-use plastic bottles to drink water from will ingest enough plastic into their body to create a credit card. So when you think of it in terms like that, it's daunting, and it can be really intimidating to think that plastics are so endemic throughout society and throughout the world, really. But I think there's, well, and I should say too, that it's not by accident. It was when I was much younger, there was a movie called The Graduate, and there's a great scene in that movie where the young college graduate is told by a wealthy businessman, the future is in one word, Ben, plastics. And it kind of resonates because we see now that the oil and gas industry, which is seeing, the transition that the world is making into non oil and gas based transportation. So they're losing that market sector in the transportation sector. They have to replace it with something. And so increasingly, they're pushing more and more plastics on us, even with this, mythical argument that plastics are recyclable and, you should feel free to continue to use single-use plastics as long as you put it in the blue bin, all is good. And we know that that's nonsense. It's just a lie that's been foisted on the people by the chemical industry and the oil and gas industry. So what are some things that we can do that really do work? Well, one of them is by prohibiting use of single-use plastics in the first place. And you mentioned the plastic bag ban. That was a huge step forward. The city of Los Angeles enacted its own bag ban probably a decade ago. And we soon saw that business interests, including the retail industry, found ways to get around that by creating thicker plastic bags and then saying that they weren't single use anymore. They were, multi-use bags, even though no one ever uses them for multiple uses. So the statewide steps that CalPIRG helped to lead are going to be very, very important in trying to shut off that kind of use. We've taken a number of other steps in Los Angeles too. We, in 2021, we enacted an ordinance that foodware accessories would be available only on request. So all of those, forks and knives and everything that just get thrown into the bag that no one ever uses because they're taking their food home anyway, that would only be available upon request. In 2023, we again prohibited the use of single-use plastic bags in stores and takeout restaurants. Redefined that to make more strengthen that ordinance. We eliminated the use of all non-recyclable utensils, foodware, bottles, and containers at all city facilities and events. We restricted the distribution and sale of polystyrene. So there's a number of steps that we've taken forward, but these one-off solutions are inadequate in themselves. So just a few weeks ago, on October 1st, the council approved a programmatic EIR, which was prepared by our Department of Sanitation with great deal of input from the community, from activist organizations, from the scientific world, from even from the business world, to try to find a comprehensive plastics reduction program. And that's really an important step forward, because once you have that kind of blueprint in place and you have a programmatic EIR in place, you can make the difficult policy choices among different options, the some of which are more effective than others, some of which will have unintended consequences. All of that is taken into account in a comprehensive EIR. So it's a really important step forward. And the city's going to be moving forward with implementing reusable foodware in dine-in restaurants, creating even for takeout dining, recyclable and compostable foodware, including, plant-based products like bamboo and other organic materials, requiring reusable plastic printer cartridges, and eliminating, all of these the abundance of used printer cartridges. All of these are things that any one of which taken by itself is not going to have a statistically significant impact on the flood of plastics that you described at the outset, Fiona. But taken together, they start to have a real impact. But more importantly than that, in my view, if you take all those things together, all of that policy making, it creates a change in societal behavior. Because every time we enact one of these ordinances, it's publicized, people hear about it, they start to think twice about whether or not they really need that straw or that plastic fork or whatever. And then they go on from that to think, do I really need these single-use bags when I'm at the store? When I purchase items at the grocery store or wherever else, do I choose the one with more plastic packaging or less? By changing that kind of behavior and having that behavioral change spread throughout society, that's how we'll really make an impact, and once and for all, finally start to turn the tide on this flood of plastic pollution. So thank you again to CalPIRG and to my colleagues who are on this call for the great work that you've done. And as I leave the council, I look forward to continuing to support you in those efforts.
Thank you so much, Council President Emeritus, for all the work you've done on this issue and for being here today to speak with us. I think you're right. Let's continue to create that social change together. I'll now like to pass the baton over to Marjorie Fan, the Environmental Supervisor at LA Sanitation and Environment, to talk about how some of these initiatives that Council President Emeritus described are working out.
Thanks, Fiona, and thank you, Councilmember Krikorian, for your leadership in in this area. As Fiona said in the intro, my name is Marjorie Fan, and I'm with LA Sanitation and Environment. I manage the Education, Outreach, and Enforcement Program for the city's Plastics Reduction Program. Next slide, please. Today, I'll present on the recent plastics reduction policies that the city has implemented and the early impacts of these policies have had on the city, and also the comprehensive plastics reduction program that Councilmember Krikorian mentioned, and what we're working on next steps. But first, a little bit about who we are as an agency. LA Sanitation is a city department responsible for managing solid waste for the city of Los Angeles. We collect solid waste from over 750,000 single-family and small multifamily households and city facilities. We also have a partnership with 6 private haulers to collect solid waste from 65,000 large multifamily households, condos, and commercial businesses. In addition to managing solid waste for our residents and businesses, we also manage wastewater and stormwater for the city. Our mission is to protect public health and the environment. Next slide. The City of Los Angeles has been on the forefront of tackling plastic pollution and reducing the input of single-use plastics into the city's waste stream and environment for over a decade. As you can see this in this timeline, to date, we have adopted 6 ordinances that either bans or restrict the use of certain single-use plastics. Next slide. As Councilmember Krikorian mentioned, over a decade ago, we were one of the first cities to ban single-use carryout bags back in 2013, which banned stores such as supermarkets, drugstores, and grocery stores from providing or offering single-use carryout bags at checkout. Next slide. This ordinance came before the state's bag ban. Much of the language seen in the state law, including the types of applicable businesses, is modeled after our policy. Our ordinance was implemented in 2 phases and has been in effect since July 1st of 2014. Next slide. Fast forward to 2022, which was a big milestone year for the city in terms of tackling plastic pollution. We were instructed by the City Council to evaluate comprehensive strategies to reduce plastic waste and identify policies that are low-hanging fruits and can be implemented quickly to achieve plastic reduction. One of those low-hanging fruits that we identified was expanding the bag ban to additional businesses that the first ordinance did not cover. In a few months after that, in December 2022, City Council adopted an ordinance expanding the bag ban to additional businesses. Next slide. These additional businesses include apparel stores, farmers market, food or beverage facilities, which includes restaurants, hardware stores, and open air markets. The ordinance was implemented in 2 phases and has been in full effect since July 1st of last year. Next slide. With the expansion of our bag ban, we have seen businesses quickly adapt to the new requirements. Here are a couple examples of businesses that we have observed replacing their single-use carryout bags to paper or reusable bags. The picture on the left is from a hardware store, and the one on the right is from an apparel store. Next slide. Along with expanding the bag ban, at the same year, we also adopted 2 additional low-hanging fruits, which are an ordinance banning expanded polystyrene, also known as styrofoam or foam, and an ordinance requiring zero waste in city facilities and events. Next slide. The styrofoam ban prohibits businesses citywide from using, selling, distributing styrofoam products, including ones that are used for food service like cups and plates, egg cartons, food trays, coolers, and ice chests, and also shipping materials like packing peanuts. This ordinance was also implemented in 2 phases, and it went into effect for large businesses in April of last year and for all other businesses in April of this year. Next slide. The ban is literally transforming store aisles citywide, from having store aisles containing styrofoam products to having products that are recyclable or compostable. The picture on the left from what we observed was from a major grocery chain. After observing the store was still selling styrofoam products after the ban was in effect, we contacted their corporate office and they quickly replaced their products with non-styrofoam products. The ban is also creating other positive changes. Our ban for styrofoam exempt products that are shipped from outside the city, but we have observed companies voluntarily updating their packaging to align with the ban. Shown on the right is a picture of meat products that were shipped from outside the city in non-styrofoam products. Next slide. We believe education and outreach is key to successful implementation of our ordinances. We are currently taking a multifaceted education-first approach to implementing these ordinances, which include distributing informational materials such as flyers, mailers, and resource guides. And we work to ensure that all these materials are available in Spanish and other languages as requested by the community. We also provide presentation like what we are doing today, table at community events, and do in-person business outreach. Every week, our team visit businesses in a different neighborhood in the city to talk to business owners and staff about the new ordinances. Additionally, we also do mass mailing, email, and social media campaigns to further get the word out. Here are some outreach metrics since January of 2023. Today, we have distributed flyers to over 800 businesses and partners. Next slide. Like Councilmember Krikorian said, our ordinance are just one off, but we know that the work's not done. There's still a lot more that we can do to further reduce single-use plastics. Also, in the same year, in 2022, City Council instructed sanitation to develop a comprehensive plastics reduction strategy to further reduce the use of single-use plastic and began the environmental review process for this program as required by CEQA. Next slide. We started the CEQA process early last year. First, we developed a project description containing a great list of additional upstream and downstream plastic reduction measures that the city could implement, and then analyze the environmental impacts of these potential measures. Public input was incorporated into analysis and culminated into a program environmental impact report. Last month, the program environmental impact report was adopted by City Council. Now that the CEQA review is complete, we're now working to engage with stakeholders to solicit feedback on things like definitions, implementation schedule, resource needs for potential new ordinances. This feedback will inform City Council on how to proceed. Some of the potential ordinances we are researching are including reusable foodware for dine-in, recyclable and compostable takeout requirements, banning single-use cartridges, and also piloting a returnable, reusable takeout foodware program. And next slide, this is my last slide. With this concludes my presentation. We really appreciate this opportunity to share our progress with you all today. We continue to work diligently every day to implement our ordinances and also develop potential new ordinances to create a cleaner and more sustainable Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marjorie. Like I said before, everyone, we'll have some time at the end for questions if you have questions for Marjorie about more about the things that LA has done so far. So now I'd like to pass the floor over to Julia Heath, who is the Secretary of Berkeley's Zero Waste Commission.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us and thank you for having me. My name is Julia Heath. I am the Zero Waste Commission Secretary. I'm also the City of Berkeley's Recycling Program Manager, and so I am tasked with implementing and enforcing our single-use foodware and litter reduction ordinance. Personally, I like the Q&A better, so I'm going to run through these slides pretty quickly. They're kind of high level. Unfortunately, our ordinance was adopted and scheduled to go to implementation and enforcement just before the pandemic started. So essentially, we were stalled for a few years, and we've just really been ramping up work on this again in the last year. So what our ordinance requires, you can go to the next slide, is 5 major things. The biggest priority for me personally is the reusables for on-site dining. So if you offer a space for your patrons to dine on-site, they are required to be served in reusable foodware. The patron-facing sort stations in establishments where patrons bus their own dishes. I believe this is a statewide requirement now, as well as the accessories upon request. If you do take a disposable, there is a 25-cent charge, and the disposables must be BPI certified compostable. Next slide, please. So originally, Berkeley has its own environmental health department, which is a little bit unique. Most jurisdictions have these services provided by the county, but in the city of Berkeley, we provide many of the services that counties usually provide. So originally, we were supposed to have a partnership with our environmental health inspectors to help us with the inspection and enforcement piece of this ordinance. Due to understaffing, that has never really materialized. And we were pretty significantly understaffed in my team as well. Luckily, we aren't at the moment, but the way that we addressed this was by forming a partnership with our stormwater inspectors to inspect for restaurant compliance. Last year, in 2023, they inspected about half of our restaurants. They finished those inspections last year for a total of 648 restaurants that were inspected. We found that 175 of them were in compliance with the piece of it that requires reusables for on-site dining. That's only about 27% compliance. We felt like that was fairly good level of compliance, considering, how we hadn't been focusing on the implementation piece of the ordinance during the pandemic. But what we're seeing is that there are some technicalities to this that I think are worth bringing to this group, which is that businesses will have the reusable foodware on site. However, when you walk into the business, you will also see many of the patrons still using disposables while sitting on premises at the business. And so we're digging a little bit deeper into this to figure out if this is a communication breakdown with the cashier or the back of house, or if this is because so many people are using apps to order ahead that don't really offer a reusable option or an option to fill a customer brought reusable cup or container once they get on site, even though they've ordered ahead. So those are just considerations. And what we've been thinking is that maybe our ordinance should require a different conversation with the cashier. Instead of asking for here to go, should the question be, would you like to pay 25 cents for a disposable, and really help the customer connect a little bit better with the cost that's associated with their disposable lifestyle choices. Next slide, please. So now we are so lucky to have 3 California Climate Action Corps fellows joining us to support this work this year and next year until August. So they'll really be our boots on the ground to make sure that we're touching all of these businesses. They're going to be going cold calling, as well as going door to door to provide education and outreach about the requirements for the ordinance and the resources that we're offering to support the ordinance. We also offer free technical assistance. We have a contract with Rethink Disposable to provide this assistance, but all of our team is also shadowing Rethink Disposable staff so we can bring this technical assistance and support in-house. Our county waste authority, better known as Stop Waste, has funded about 3 different reusable foodware service providers recently. And so we are also hoping that some of this outreach will generate warm leads for people who want to participate in pilots to try out reusable foodware as a to-go solution to reduce the need to continue using regrettable substitutes for any type of disposable material, whether it's conventional plastics or compostable plastics. We would really like to be able to make the case that we can successfully expand the ordinance to cover takeout as well as reusables for on-site dining. Some more feedback that we've received is that it's been very difficult for our reusable foodware service providers to be able to scale due to the high cost of renting dishwashing space. So what we're hoping to also do through these efforts with outreach and engagement is to map businesses that have underutilized commercial kitchen space where they might be able to subsidize a rental space for a few hours a day to support dishwashing operations for our third-party reusable takeout vendors. We also would like to identify a city facility that we can use as a wash hub to support both edible food recovery per 1383, as well as to help these reusable foodware service providers scale. We're looking to use CalRecycle local assistance grant funding to help support those efforts, since they would also support capacity expansion for food recovery. And our long-term goal is to renovate our city facility to have a very robust commercial kitchen to support all of these different initiatives. We also, as I said, run our own Meals on Wheels program, which is usually run by the county. So the city facility that we're looking into is where Meals on Wheels is currently housed. And we would like to form a partnership with Meals on Wheels to work out of the same location and to transition our Meals on Wheels into using reusable foodware to deliver their meals as well. And I think I already mentioned that we work very closely in partnership with our waste authority, Stop Waste, and that we have a contract with Rethink Disposables and are looking to support our reusable foodware grantees. Next slide, please. Oh, so that's it. And if you have any questions, I'm very excited to hear more about them. And if we don't get them all answered today, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to have the conversation. And I also am on the steering committee for the West Coast Government Reuse Forum, where we've created a forum to have these kinds of discussions on a monthly basis and to support everybody who's working so diligently in this community. Thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Julia, for that helpful overview. I think it's really helpful to tease out those learnings so that cities who want to do more can have the most information about best practices and learnings moving forward. And like Julia said, we'll move on to a question and answer period shortly. But before we do that, I just want to share a resource that CalPERG has put together for any community members or advocates on the call who want to work to pass stronger ordinances in their own cities, especially on plastic pollution and plastic bag waste. So I'm going to share in the chat a link to the toolkit. Oh, you know what? Maybe I can't share it right now. So I'm going to share it to you guys. Oh, there we go. There we go. Sorry. So many tabs. Okay. Okay, you should all have the toolkit there in the chat now. If you scroll to the bottom of that article, there is 3 different pop-outs linked there. We know that demonstrating public support for a local ordinance is one of the most effective ways for ensuring that the best policy gets passed. So the toolkit that we put together includes a sample petition that can be used to collect signatures in support of stronger ordinances. It also includes a sample letter to the editor, which can help build visibility for local ordinances in the media and show support ahead of key votes and educate the public, elected officials, and small businesses about what you're trying to achieve. And then finally, the toolkit also includes a sample sign-on letter that can be used to collect signatures from local businesses or community organizations in favor of stronger ordinances. We know that local communities can do more to take on plastic waste, and we know that everyone on this call can take a key role in making that happen. And so whether you're a city council member or you're a sustainability leader in your city, or you're just a community member who really cares about doing all they can to limit plastic pollution, we look forward to continuing this work and continuing these conversations with the folks on this call to kind of hammer out the details of these efforts and support you in any way we can. Okay, and so we're happy to take questions on this as we move into the question and answer period. And yeah, so now we're going to open up our question and answer period. And so you should have a section on the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions. I see a couple have already been submitted. Okay, I'm gonna share. Okay, so the first question I have, and maybe let's see, what methods would you recommend to city staff for providing local businesses with information on where they can purchase alternative non-plastic products that comply with current regulations? Does any of our speakers want to answer that question?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to I'll try and look for some resources that I can drop into the chat. The city or the county of San Mateo, they have some really good resources that they have online. I believe Upstream and Rethink Disposable also have some good resources online that we like to direct people to.
Thank you, Julia. We can share those resources in a follow-up email as well. Okay, are there any lessons learned during the implementation phase of the expanded plastic bag ban in LA that we should take into consideration when pushing for expansion in other cities?
That's a really good question. I think I think having a phased approach it's a good practice. Focusing first on larger businesses and then expanding the ban to smaller businesses. Usually the larger businesses have more resources to quickly adapt to new changes and also allows time for the smaller businesses to prepare, um, use up their supply, and then look for alternative bags to look for alternative bags that they can purchase and that can work for their operations.
Thanks, Marjorie. Okay, then we also have a question for Julia. Thanks for highlighting the partnership between the department and stormwater inspectors to inspect for compliance with the reuse ordinance. Did the city ever consider partnering with health inspectors for enforcement or compliance?
Yeah, so that was always the original intent. We were supposed to partner with our environmental health inspectors, and at the county level, the health inspectors are doing inspections for the food donation requirements for 1383. However, that partnership within our own city has fallen short because our environmental health department is so significantly understaffed right now.
Thank you. What activities have you found key to gaining buy-in from businesses and community members?
That's a really good question. I think it's something that we're still struggling with. I think with the businesses, it's always helpful to target their bottom line. Not all businesses have time to make sure that they're doing all of the best things for the environment, even if they're well-intentioned. So I think really offering the business case and, Rethink Disposable has a lot of valuable case studies on their website about how much money businesses can save when they switch to reusables. I think I missed a slide on my presentation, but we, similarly to I think what LA Sanitation is also doing, we're in the process of developing behavior change and outreach and education campaign with an ad agency right now to really raise awareness around the ordinance and their requirements to target the consumer to make sure that they're requesting the reusables on the consumer side so that it's not just relying on the business to be in compliance with an ordinance, and that it really is targeting a behavior and a cultural shift.
Yeah, Marjorie talked about some of the extensive outreach that LA San has done to the business community, which, is obviously vital to the success of this. But I think one of the points that Julia just made about making the business case is something that a lot of people just don't even consider. And what we found with the single-use foodware items, the disposable forks and knives and so on that are just thrown into the bag with everything else that's going for your DoorDash delivery, whether people need that or not, it's just thrown in. What we found is that the restaurants who were doing this felt that they needed to do this even though no one was using those items. So it wasn't even single use, it was no use plastic. These are things that just go directly from the bag into the trash or into a big drawer that you have in your house filled with, these disposable items that someday you're going to use. What we found is that the restaurants themselves recognized enormous cost savings by just not doing it. And you can make arguments about shifting to reusable items and so on, and whether there's markets, whether the markets are available for those things. But just getting rid of these alone saved the restaurant substantial amount of money, especially during COVID when so many people were ordering, all their meals in, essentially. So you got to find ways to be able to make the case for positive cost savings and economic opportunities.
Thank you. We also have a question from Cindy Tran, who's the Garden Grove Mayor Pro Tem with 10 students from 6th to 8th graders who are doing research into ocean pollution. And they want to know how you could encourage students to use more reusable products.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for including young people in this conversation, because it's so important. And just now you saw Fiona take a drink of water from her reusable water container. So that this is one of the ways, is just changing daily habits. And students who can explain to other students why this is important, you can really have a very big impact just by changing your own behaviors and explaining to other people why you're doing that, other students why you're doing that. But you can also have a voice with your school administrators as well. And we've seen great progress that's been made at LAUSD, who has a real commitment at the board level and at the administration level to greater sustainability. But still, schools are enormous sources of waste, enormous sources of food waste, plastic waste, and everything else. And so if students can organize and talk to their administrators about why this is important to your future, you can really have a significant impact in changing behaviors.
Yeah, thank you, council member. I would reiterate that you guys can use the toolkit we made to collect petitions from your fellow students and give them to your school principal or the school board, and that can make a big impact. Lots of good questions coming in. I see one that's asking for copies of the LA and Berkeley ordinance we discussed today. And yes, we can definitely send those out after the webinar. Someone is asking if we can comment on, how the cities were able to navigate other interests like the plastic industry when passing these ordinances.
So this is a really important question, and I'll give you an example of back before I was in the council, when I was in the California State Assembly in 2008 or 2009, I don't remember. A number of us introduced a whole collection of plastics related bills. And there were 6 or 8 bills that were introduced to address this problem. And all of them were killed except one. I had a bill to address the problem of nurdles. Nurdles are the pre-production plastic pellets that are shipped around the country by the train load to make injection molded plastics and other things. So that one passed, all the others failed because this is an industry that has tremendous power, especially at the state and federal level. Now, that's all the more reason why it's important that we at the local level continue to act, because as we enact more and more local ordinances on these things, it creates a momentum that impacts the state legislature and also creates even an incentive for industry to work with the advocacy community to develop statewide solutions so that, we don't do even more difficult things for them at the local level. And that's a good thing to have them continuing to do that. One thing you'll find, which we saw with the plastic bag ban and, just about every other time, you won't hear from the lobbyists themselves so much. You'll hear from the small businesses and their employees that will come into council chambers to say, if you ban plastic bags, this local business that has 200 employees manufacturing plastic bags is going to go out of business. You'll hear a lot of that. And you just have to look past that and realize that that's organized, by the industry. And as we take these transitional steps towards sustainability, yes, there is going to be some economic displacement, but it's going to end up producing more jobs and more opportunity and more small businesses that can take advantage of new markets for their products. So it just requires council members to, sort of look past the story of that one business who shows up at the public comment microphone and look at the bigger picture of economic gain that comes from these sustainability measures.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think we have time for about 2 more questions. I have a kind of a technical one, I think, for Marjorie. Someone is saying that many restaurants won't let folks bring their own cups because of considerations with the Department of Health in LA County. Are there efforts to resolve this issue?
That's a good question. We haven't really worked on addressing this issue, but we'll definitely take it back and look into it again.
And I can just add that, AB 619 at the state level, I believe, went into effect January of 2019, which kind of repealed a lot of the more difficult legislation, where I think that most businesses got the original idea that they were not able to do customer refill. So I think maybe education from the state level to more of the local jurisdiction environmental health department staff would be something that would be really helpful in encouraging businesses to let them know that this is now legal and that they're encouraged to do customer refill.
Thank you. And on that note, building off what you said, Julie, about making it easier for businesses to take action, do any of our panelists have any final advice for community advocates who want to make it easier for decision makers and folks implementing these policies to just make it possible to get the best policies out there and working?
I think we've touched upon a big one, which is including the business community in your discussions. Because the single easiest way to torpedo policies like this is to have somebody come up and say, yeah, but I'm going to lose my job, or, this is going to cost my small business 20% more a year or something, and I'm going to have to cut. Those are the biggest challenges, I think, that come to policymakers. And so embracing the business community early on is a way to not only politically advantageous in getting stuff done, but it's also going to result in probably better, more impactful policies. Because if you enact policies that are not workable, you're never going to have enough enforcement resources to go out and make it real. So having a workable policy by embracing the business community at the beginning, I think, is really important. And using some of the models that we've already developed by doing that is a way, that maybe you can avoid some of those pitfalls. The other thing I would just add, and I want to squeeze this in, I don't know if it's exactly responsive, but I do want to squeeze this in because I also want to thank LA San again about one other thing, and that is the change in mentality about plastic recycling. And encouraging people to understand that the fact that something has a chasing arrow symbol on it does not make it a green product. And there's still is this attitude out there in the public that, well, you know, it's okay for me to use this plastic because I just throw it in the bin and somebody will take care of it. It'll be recycled. And LA San and other sanitation agencies used to actually encourage that. Throw any plastic in the bin, anything, just throw it in the bin. And they have since significantly changed that and educated people that that the solution to plastic pollution is not recycling, it's not using it in the first place. And so I think incorporating that into this discussion and making sure that the lobbyists and others who want to modify your ordinance don't get away with saying, you know, there's an exemption in the ordinance for recyclable plastic or compostable plastic or some of these other mythical things. That's a really important part of this as well. Stand firm against that.
Thank you so much, Council Member. I know we didn't get to a couple of folks' questions today, so we'll do our best to follow up by email after this webinar ends. But I want to say thank you again so much to all of our guests and attendees for taking the time out of your day to be with us. I know we're all very busy trying to change the world every day. And so, you know, we know this work doesn't end here. So please, if you're excited about doing more to tackle plastic waste in your community, don't hesitate to reach out to us at CalPERG and to me. I have my email here on this slide, so feel free to email me anytime. And you also visit our website for the toolkit and other resources. So thank you again for being here with us. Thank you again to Council President Emeritus Krikorian, to Marjorie Fan from LA Sanitation, and to Julia Heath from Berkeley Zero Waste Commission. We're so grateful to all of your time today and to all of you on this call. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all for your advocacy and your great work. Appreciate being a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.